since N7 Day 2023, we haven't really gotten much information about the next Mass Effect. In previous years, we had gotten, leaks and maybe, some speculation and stuff about the game using Unreal Engine 5. We had various people at BioWare or near it, maybe throwing out some vague hints and things like that. Since 2023's N7 Day, it's been basically radio silence. That makes sense. They're working on Dragon Age of the Veilguard, which is probably come out by the time you watch this video. But focus will be shifting over to Mass Effect, very likely by the end of the year, if not the beginning of 2025. As we run up to 2024's N7 Day, we got a little tidbit of info I wanted to talk about, more to kick off the excitement in the lead up to this year's N7 Day and what we may find. So let's talk about it. So here on the screen is, for anyone who pays attention, or if you have been paying attention to the next Mass Effect, you will probably know Mike Gamble. He is the executive producer and project director. That's what he is at BioWare. He's the lead on the next Mass Effect game. And he's been very, very hinty in the past about what is coming up. But the last year, he really hasn't been. He's mostly been talking about Dragon Age. You have to keep in mind that even though he's the head of another team, he has his own little team doing pre-production on the next Mass Effect game. Everyone else in the building he works in is working on Dragon Age. And even some of his own people have gone over there to help out as well. So, he's probably very supportive of their project. It makes sense that he's almost entirely focused on that game that's coming out this year, and maybe hasn't talked as much about a game that is likely maybe 3 or 4 years away. But this week, after, we got the reviews, came out for Dragon Age of the Veilguard, and people got to see more of that game, and we got to see some reviewer takes on the game and stuff like that. He decided to answer a couple small questions that I think will be more telling in the future. So if you check out over here, his first thing was, this was a kind of a post that he made kind of on his own. He said, lots of people are asking me about the Mass Effect now, that Veilguard reviews are out. October 31st is close. Both are from the studio, but Mass Effect is Mass Effect. How you bring a sci-fi RPG to life is different than other genres or IP, and has to have a different kinds of love. He followed that up by replying to himself, I assume answering other people who had, messaged him in reply to that last one, was regarding tone questions. Mass Effect will remain the mature tone of the original trilogy. That's all I'm going to say now. If I remember, I'll try to post here. This was a different tweet. He posted a tweet, took it down, and put this one up. Originally said something talking more about, expanding a little bit more on the mature and the tone being two separate things. But I think this is at least worth talking about quickly. If you've paid attention to the conversation around Dragon Age of the Veilguard, you get a lot of different takes that, in my opinion, at least should be taken at different levels of value. We have, unfortunately, which is all too common in gaming now, basically with every game that comes out, especially AAA games, this conversation that's kind of brought up by what I would call the worst of us, the worst of the gaming community, whether it's influencers who are clearly grifting and, saying awful things and pushing awful ideas just because it's really good for clicks and for monetization of all their social media and other media forms, and all the people who have bought into what they think and just spout just some of both the dumbest stuff you've ever heard and just some of the worst stuff you've ever heard. That's not what I'm talking about in this video. That's the thing that we just kind of need to ignore, even though it's hard sometimes. The other side of this are people who have been talking about Dragon Age of the Veilguard, good or bad, who are serious and who are worth listening to. And, there's been a lot of praise for Dragon Age of the Veilguard. It has a 83, 84 Metacritic OpenCritic score. It's generally being reviewed extremely well. There's a lot of people who really like it. There's also people who have been more critical of it. And I think some of that criticism falls into the other category I was talking about, but there's some legitimate criticisms or, personal issues with the game, such as, it having kind of a stylized slash realistic aesthetic. People have talked about, this Pixar effect, which, Mike Gamble themselves has even said is maybe a little exaggerated. But it is worth considering for the next Mass Effect game. Now, part of this conversation that Mike didn't bring up and actually hasn't been confirmed yet is the games are going to be on different engines as far as we know. A few years ago, there was a lot of rumors and talk about how all of the job listings for the Mass Effect game, which it was, they had job listings for a few years. There's maybe a little bit more than a dozen and a half of them that were like director positions for the next Mass Effect game at BioWare, and many of them were specifically referencing Unreal Engine 5 and looking for people with experience with that engine, and workflows and all that stuff. It seems pretty likely that that's what the next game is going to be on, while Dragon Age: The Veilguard is on Frostbite. And Frostbite's the engine that Dragon Age Inquisition was on, Mass Effect Andromeda, Anthem, as well as now all of EA's sports games, and a bunch of their other games as well, including the Battlefield games being the ones that the engine was designed for. And the move to Unreal Engine doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be more realistic looking or more based in like a realistic tone. But it definitely probably means it's not just going to be the exact same idea that they've had with Dragon Age. My wild speculation about why Dragon Age has the aesthetic it has is probably partially just artistic license and the way they wanted to make this game. I would argue there's probably a chance too that at some point, in the last 2 or 3 years when the game was actually in full production, they were like, we have a big task ahead of us. We need to get this game out in relatively quick order. Do we spend a huge amount of our resources and time really diving into making this a hyper realistic looking, very super realistic thing? Or do we say we're going to make this have a bit of a stylized look that's going to be a little bit easier in some ways? And it seems like they went that way, and that's fine. I think it looks okay. Not my favorite style, but it doesn't offend me. 5 minutes into the game, I'm not going to think about it ever again. But when it comes to Mass Effect, I want that realistic aesthetic. It's always had that. Even Andromeda, for all of its failings and stuff, still tried to keep a realistic aesthetic. Really, the bigger issue with that was a quality issue and the animations and all that. Different story for a different video. But this makes me really hopeful for the next Mass Effect. It gives me some hope we're going to go back. And all of the teasers and concept art and the trailers and everything we've seen so far has suggested this before Mike even said it. That trailer from 2020, albeit very old and probably having no real impact on what the game is going to look like, was still going for that tone. Even the trailer back in 2023 last year, that the quick 30-second trailer, still had that very familiar aesthetic that we've seen from the previous games. The last thing I'll say is that this bit of info and how bad Mike seems to want to talk about Mass Effect as the Veilguard is coming out has me kind of hopeful for N7 Day this year. I was a little held back on how much info we could really get. It's only going to be a week after Veilguard comes out. They haven't even begun full production on it yet and probably won't for a few months. But they've also had the game in pre-production for like 4+ years at this point. Seemingly a decent sized team on it doing that stuff. There should be stuff to show and to tell. So we'll have to wait and see. More than anything, there's been indications, both public and private, that there might be a lot riding on the Veilguard doing well, which it seems like it's going to financially. It's already done well in the reviews, for the next Mass Effect to even happen. And a really good way to ensure your next project happens is to get fans excited. And just like what they was probably the purpose of that 2020 trailer, and could be the purpose of having a big N7 Day this year, right after Veilguard comes out, would be to carry that momentum of all the attention on Veilguard to take that and apply it to the next game and get people excited for that already. We may get nothing, for the same reasons. But I'm definitely starting to lean more into the idea that they may show us a lot because it may be somewhat important to the studio to like survive. I think they're going to be fine. Veilguard's looking great, and hopefully EA is really smart and knows that the money franchise is probably Mass Effect, and if it gets proper time and comes out in a reasonable amount of time, it's almost certainly going to be a big hit for them, especially if they learn the lessons from their last few games. If you have any thoughts about all of this, please let me know down in the comments. If you're a weirdo, I am going to hide you from the channel, but you'll never know, and that's okay. If you want more information about Mass Effect, you want coverage on N7 Day, especially next week and for the next year, probably, be sure to subscribe to this channel. If you like this video, hit that like button. If you really want to support everything I do and get a few perks as well, like getting to see videos early, please consider becoming a YouTube member. If you want to check out all of my other content and the other ways to support my channel, click on the links in the description of this video. That is all I have for this one. So until next time.